Hello, my name is Sean Ennis from Ennis Management, and thank you for joining me once again here at the Creative Collective. And today I'm honored to be joined by a very special guest. He's a singer-songwriter from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, John Vento.
How are you tonight?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So, you're from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Yep.
So, what can you tell, what's one thing that you could share with me that someone not from Pittsburgh wouldn't know?
Wow. Well, you know, we're really a thriving city. There's a lot of young people. There's a lot of new energy in this town. Sure, we're well known as a dusty old steel mill town. But over the past 15 years, we've gone through a great transformation into technologies and in the medical field. And it's just a really vibrant community while maintaining our strong ethical and ethnic communities with, you know, the old-fashioned work ethic that we have. And, you know, the music scene here is really great. There's a lot of young people that are pursuing original music, and then there's more experienced and established folks that are doing the same. So it's just really a vibrant community.
Now, can you share one of your earliest memories involving music?
Wow, well, of course. We'll go way back when I was probably 3 or 4 years old, and music was a huge part of my family, and my mother's family in particular, because her father and many of her cousins and uncles and so on were professional musicians, going back to the early 1900s. And for me, an early memory was my mother just playing her albums of the 1960s. Especially, she loved Motown and R&B, and it's just a very vibrant memory of those. The first time I heard those great songs.
And coming from such a musical family and background, what sort of impact did that have on you?
Well, it's the obvious one is it's a bloodline. You know, it's genetic. So music was a huge part of our world and remains a huge part of my world. I was surrounded with it. You know, I'd go visit my grandparents, and there was my grandpa playing the mandolin and singing for the whole neighborhood. So, and as I became a teenager and started to grow up, and my friends and we were constantly at concerts. I really never at that point, though, when I was younger, dreamed or thought that I would become a performer or a singer. So that's been kind of a great surprise. It happened a little later in life, but as far as having music, it was in every aspect of my world from the very beginning.
And growing up, did you sing in choir? Did you take instrument lessons when you were growing up?
No, I wish I would have. I wish I would have done all of that. I did sing, you know, like screaming over the radio or singing to the record player kind of thing. I did do that quite often. But I really never took the craft seriously. I never worked with, teachers, as far as music teachers, guitar lessons. I didn't do any of that kind of stuff.
And what music or artists influenced you?
There's a wide range. I'm a little bit goofy. I love big band. My father was a big band fan. You know, Glenn Miller, Tommy Dorsey, dating back to that kind of stuff. Motown was a big influence, and at the same time, Dylan, and I mentioned Harry Chapin earlier, and those kind of classic folk artists. So I'm not sure it was one genre that influenced me. It was more kind of like a smorgasbord, if you will. But I would think that those three elements were a big factor in my comfort zone, what I love, my favorite stylistically my favorite music.
And how do you think having such a varied interest or kind of wheelhouse of musical taste has influenced your own original music?
Well, I think it's made it different. You know, I mean, there's not. If you get a chance to listen to this album, Love, Lust, and Other Wreckage, there isn't two tracks that sound alike, which in today's world is really unusual. I mean, usually, you know, that in contemporary music especially, they latch onto a hook or a stylistic approach, and, you know, you might have 10, 12, 11 tracks, and they all kind of have a similar feel or a similar vibe. But I think because of my own diverse interest and influences, I think that comes through in this project in particular, that each track stands on its own with its own style and approach.
Now, with that being said, what genre of music do you consider your work or this album to be?
Probably Americana, folk / rock and roll. I think it was originally intended to be more folk-oriented, singer-songwriter, acoustic guitar kind of stuff. But as we moved along, we began to add elements, especially, you know, rock guitar and drums. So about half of the album has full production, and about half of it is really stripped back in a folk kind of vein.
Now, I think we touched on this briefly a little bit, being that you are from such a musical family, but eventually, what made you want to become an artist?
Wow. Just, I think, the love of the music and the love of performing, and having an opportunity to connect with people and actually, you know, look an audience in the eye. I mean, it was all about live performance initially. Recording wasn't even on the radar screen those first few years. So it was just really a love of performing and a love of connecting with other human beings, and maybe bringing some entertainment and some fun into the world.
And can you describe one of your earliest times performing?
Sure, I can describe to you the first time I performed, because I'll never forget it. It was at a club outside of Pittsburgh. We had a band called The Essentials. We weren't very good, and the place was packed, you know, because we were all young and got all our friends to come out. But I'll never forget that evening for many reasons, most notably that supposedly there was a shooting in the parking lot outside. So the club was put on lockdown, the band stopped, everybody was in fear, only to turn out that it was a car that had backfired, and it was a false alarm. But it was just kind of one of those memorable experiences, and I did think to myself, you know, maybe this is not meant to be, that this isn't the thing that I'm supposed to do. And by the way, I was pretty horrible, and the band was better than me, but not by a whole lot. You know, we were kind of young and still trying to figure out how to do this music thing.
Wow, that's pretty wild. So how old were you at this time?
I was probably 26, so I was kind of a late starter, if you will.
Now, I want to go back to, you mentioned that initially when you started doing live performances before you did in-studio recording. And I think Go ahead?
Yeah, long before, yes.
And I think for a lot of musicians in today's digital music age, you know, a lot of musicians are recording in a home studio, and one of the challenges and goals is to actually get out there and do some performing in front of an audience. Can you sort of talk about kind of your musical journey and doing those early performances and then going into the recording studio?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think one of the big mistakes I made, and so many young people make, is, you start out and you're a cover band. So your live performances are basically singing other people's music. Why do you do that? Because you want to get into a club and you want to get paid, and you want to have people dance to songs that they know. So it's a natural progression. But it's also a slippery slope, because you can get caught up in that, that groove, and next thing you know, 6, 7, 8, 9 years goes by, and you're still a cover band, and you've never really created your own work. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking cover bands if that's what they want to be. And especially in this age where there's all these so-called tribute bands out there. I mean, you see them at festivals and all these major venues. It's kind of like been this classic rock wave of tribute bands. However, if you do want to be an original artist and really create your own voice, you need to record a lot sooner and maybe run parallel paths. So, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? I think live performance should come first so you can hone your craft, but then quickly move into writing. And if you're good enough and you have a band that is well rehearsed and has performed well live, you just take that band in the studio and start creating music. And now it's easier than ever, as you mentioned. Home studios have technology today that 30 years ago would cost a fortune to have the same capabilities. So I think there's a fine balance, but live performance is where you really, really hone your craft, in my opinion.
And what advice could you give to kind of a new artist or a new band that's looking to do some live performances? From your experience, what could you say to them?
I would say get up and do it. And meaning first rehearse, and be prepared. So that when you have those opportunities for live performances, you do everything in your power to really nail it and deliver a great show. But if you're like us and you start off and you don't deliver a great show, then work hard to make it better the next time and just keep working your craft. It's like anything in life, it takes hard work and dedication, and also self-reflection. It's tough for an artist to necessarily be self-critical, so we were lucky that we had some folks in the audience that were friends, but would also be very, very truthful with us. The old saying, it takes someone to truly love you to tell you you have bad breath. Well, we had bad breath when it came to music, and I had people that would say to me, hey, your performance is flat, or this song doesn't fit your style, or the band really can't deliver that well. And then you just fine-tune it from there. Do the work.
That's a really great saying. And so from that, not negative feedback, but I would say more of an honest critique, you guys were able to kind of work on some things and get better?
Absolutely. By the way, I still do that today. I mean, I have a sound man who's very critical. And, at set break or at the end of a show, we'll discuss some things we did well. And thankfully, nowadays, that's 95% of the show. But, Saturday night, I had a big show with my band. And, there were some elements of the show I just didn't feel we really nailed it, or that we really delivered well. And after the gig, I pulled our sound man aside, who I really respect, and I said, hey, what about this, and this? And he said, to be honest with you, that didn't fit. It didn't work. Or you might say there were segments of this song where your voice was flat. You really need to listen closer to those notes. So it's constant self-evaluation and critical feedback. If you want to be surrounded by yes men, you really can't grow, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Now let's talk about this album, Love, Lust, and Other Wreckage.
Mm-hmm.
So what's sort of the story or concept or theme behind this album?
Well, it's all built around relationships, and more specifically, the heartbreak that goes with relationships and the different phases. And it all started with one song called Baby Blues, which was a song that I wrote with my friend Bert Laubel. I was alone and had screwed up another really, really great relationship, which was a pattern, and was regretful and in a place where I just wanted to express that. So that's where it started, and then it started to move into different directions. For example, another track on the album is called Well, Yeah, Maybe, and that's about that point in a relationship where, you've already split up, and things aren't working, but you try to reconnect. And I don't know about you, but most times it doesn't work. So, well, yeah, maybe I'll give it a shot. Let's get together. Let's talk. Let's figure out what we did wrong, and maybe we can make it work. Then we just kept exploring different phases of a relationship, and particularly from a man's perspective.
And what are some of the other songs that are on the project?
Well, we have one cover song on the album, which was a Tom Waits cover called I Hope I Don't Fall in Love with You. And that, of course, is all about some guy sitting in a bar basically trying to make a pickup or a hookup. And, he's alone and just looking for company for the evening. There's a song that's more of a rock song. We just released a video called Humble Way, which, is about looking in the mirror and expressing humility and making a commitment to change so you can become a better person and be in a better place for a relationship. There's a song on there called Only Love Stays Alive, and it's a beautiful track featuring Shirley Ann Hawk on vocals. Of course, she's featured throughout the album. And it's a little bit abstract. It starts off with some abstract expressions, and then it moves into the basic element of, the foundation for happiness is love. And finding that love and that peace is the key to having a vibrant and happy life, if you will. There's a song called Just Don't Care, which is a real hard rock song, and that's when you finally give up and you basically just don't care. There's a track called Follow Your Heart, which is about finding that love, but making sure that the journey that you take together is shared with give and take. And so I think I've covered a lot of them.
And so who did the majority of the writing for this album?
Well, it was a real collaborative effort, but the majority of the writing was done by my dear friend and great songwriter Bert Laubel. And Bert drove a lot of this material, and then David Granati and I started to fine-tune it and tweak it, and with great contributions from Shirley Ann Hawk, female vocalist. So we kind of were like a four-headed monster, with Bert driving the initial, building that foundation and creating that mold. And then David and Shirley Ann and I were the ones that really, really fine-tuned it and began to edit, tweak, and, bring things across the finish line. It was really an interesting process. I called it a design-build album. I've never really done anything like this. We did not have finished tracks when we went into the studio, or I should say finished songs that were written. We had sketches, and they were rough. So there was a lot of demo work in the studio, and design-build was the perfect explanation, because we were designing as we went.
And that's really interesting. So what was that experience like where you're going in to record a song and you don't really have kind of like a thought of what the finish line looks like?
Well, I will say this, for the folks that are listening to this interview, especially musicians that have experience, they know that this approach is not only very expensive, but it's also very time-consuming. It's not the ideal way to enter the studio. Other projects I've been involved with, especially with my band, the Nied's Hotel Band, we were very well rehearsed and did a lot of pre-production, and we went into the studio and we basically performed, and then we fine-tuned the tracks from there. However, this approach can be extremely frustrating. On one hand, like you said, you really can't see the finish line, but you do have to be able to visualize what you want. So on one hand, it's very frustrating and expensive and time-consuming. On the other hand, it's really, really creative. I mean, you're basically, especially with a team of collaborators and a producer, you're molding this thing like clay. And you're able to then really, truly fine-tune the music and fine-tune the finished product. And also, you get some great magical surprises that occur because you're throwing everything against the wall, and to find out what sticks. I mean, one of the best tracks on the album, Rainbows and Lightning, which was our single we released, and it hit number 16 in Canada on iTunes. That song was thrown in the scrap heap 3 different times with 3 different titles, and we kept resurrecting it and bringing it back. And for some reason couldn't let go of it, and then it became Rainbows and Lightning, and most folks that have heard the album called it their favorite track.
Yeah, I imagine that the process that you just described could certainly be really exciting. So let me ask you, about how long did it take from start to finish to construct this album, and also how many studio sessions?
Well, it took 2.5 years. So, wow, 2.5 years, how many studio sessions would that be, with an average of 2 to 3 per week? Let's do the math. So you've got, let's say you do 2 a week, so you got over 100 a year, right? So there's 200, another 50. I'd say we probably had about close to 300 sessions. Now, sessions then turn into hours, because, a session could be anywhere from 2 to 6, 7, 8 hours.
Wow. Now that's what I would call a labor of love.
It really was, and it remains. We really poured a lot into this. Every little detail, every little nuance, and hopefully when you hear the material, you'll be able to hear the work that went into it.
Now let me ask you, why did you choose, such a heavy, emotional topic, making an album around the theme of relationships?
I think that's probably because that's where that heavy topic was really weighing on me for quite a while, and my primary co-writer, Bert Lobel, shared similar experiences. So we more or less had enough stories, enough personal experience, enough real life experience that we had a whole album worth of material. And I think that it was an important message. In a lot of the songs, we're hoping that maybe they touch people, especially folks that are our age, maybe, in midlife, if you will, and in their 40s and 50s, that have gone through different struggles, that there's maybe some meaningful material here that kind of fills voids, if you will.
That's really excellent. I like that. Now, you mentioned that a lot of people that have heard the album have really gravitated to the song Rainbows and Lightning. Why do you think that song has resonated so much with people?
Well, it is more upbeat. Musically, it's really interesting. It has 2 distinct parts to it. First of all, rainbows and lightning, like a relationship. Rainbows representing the love and the color, and it's beautiful and wonderful. And then the lightning, of course, can strike at any time and do a lot of great damage. So, the way we arranged the song is the first 3 quarters of it is really kind of has a lot of hooks, and lyrically it's rainbows and lightning, and it's about finding love and discovering love and not wanting to make the same mistakes over again. And then you get to the end, and it turns into this hard rock song for about 60 seconds, where the singer, of course, I guess that's me, is worried that maybe he's not going to be able to change. And, I pray every day to get better kind of thing. And so it's interesting musically, and it has some hooky feel to it, and it has also some really great lyrics that Cheryl Ann was just a wonderful contributor on that one, and her performance is just fantastic on that song.
And now, why did you choose her to collaborate so heavily with on this project?
Well, thank you for that question, because I love talking about her contributions. Initially, we weren't going to really have any background vocalists. We were going to do some minor harmony parts and keep it really, really sparse. But about a quarter of the way into the recording, the writing, and the producing, Bert Lobel, who I mentioned earlier, he brought up the idea of having a strong female presence on the album. And I had known of Cheryl Ann. She's well known here in the Pittsburgh area and is a real talent. And I'd come to the studio a little bit early one day, and she was in a session already for another project. So she was coming out, and I was going in. We said hello. We hardly knew each other. And after she left, David was mixing the tracks that she had completed, and her performance just knocked me out. So I called Bert, and I said, you know what, I think I have somebody that we should talk to about joining the team, Cheryl Ann Hawk. And Bert met her for coffee the following Saturday, and they talked, and we had her do some auditions, and we threw some things at her, and she just killed them, and it was from day one we hit the ground running. So we wanted a strong female presence on the album, not only vocally, but also with influence. And boy, we sure nailed that from the get-go with Cheryl Ann Hawk.
Excellent. Now, let's talk about the title of the project, which I really love. Love, Lust, and Other Wreckage. So, who came up with that title?
That title came from our playwright, the woman who is writing the script for the play, Amy Hart. The title that I had for the album was Follow Your Heart. And that was the title song, the title track. And when I brought the concept of a stage play to Amy, who is a very well-known playwright, not just in Pittsburgh, but nationally, even though she lives in the Pittsburgh area. When I brought the concept to Amy and I said, I've got this album, it's called Follow Your Heart, she listened to the album, and she looked at me, she called me and said, I love the album, but I hate the title. She said, Follow Your Heart, that's so generic, pedestrian. Anybody have a title like that? And I said, well, give me something better. And she said, well, the whole album is all about love, lust, and wreckage. And I said, yes, it is. And the minute I heard it, I knew that we had a winning title. We get so many compliments on it. And then Amy directed the photo shoot for the album cover. And we went to a junkyard, with all these wrecked cars, and we had a couple models. And so the photo session involved, wreckage, and then beautiful women, representing the love and the lust, and there you have it, Love, Lust, and Other Wreckage.
Well, the title and the concept for the photo shoot are both brilliant.
Yep, I got to give Amy credit for that, my friend.
She's a genius.
All the way.
Now, where have you performed?
Well, primarily locally here in the Pittsburgh region. Clubs that are mostly original music oriented or listening rooms. I'm associated with a great listening room here in Pittsburgh called Steamworks Creative. I've performed at a place called Moondogs. It's well known here in Pittsburgh. We have some more shows coming up at different venues, but for this for this music, it really is more acoustically based, and it has to be delivered to an audience that's there to listen to the music. It's not a club kind of presentation. It's certainly not a dance thing. And even though we throw a few cover songs into the set, it's it's primarily original compositions.
And which songs do you perform most frequently?
Well, from the album Baby Blues, which was the first one I mentioned, is a staple. Another track called Good Life Made, Let Me Down Easy. We perform most of the album consistently, show after show. And then we throw in some cover songs. We do Night Moves by Bob Seger, Taxi from Harry Chapin, Love the One You're With, Stephen Stills. So, the cover songs that we select are meant to support, stylistically, the original music.
Now let me ask you, what has been a challenge in your music career, and how have you been able to overcome that challenge?
Well, there's a lot of challenges. First, having a balanced life. Music is not my primary source of income, so that's tricky. Having a business, 3 children, a family, a home. So I would say balance, because it's so easy to get out of balance and focus music, because that's fun, that's creative, that's very fulfilling. So there's a frustration factor, because if it was up to me, I wish somebody would write me a check for lots of money, and I would just do music 24/7. Unfortunately, that isn't the case in my world. So I think that's frustrating. And also, performing and getting better has been a challenge. Through the years, becoming a better singer, a better performer, a better band leader. And that has occurred kind of through work, and continuing to listen to criticism and attempting to sift through that criticism, if you will, critique, and make the changes that are necessary. Those are probably 2 big challenges that are related to the music.
Yeah, I think I really agree. Like you mentioned earlier, being open to those honest critiques and being able to then implement that so that you're able to improve is really important. Now let me ask you, you mentioned about how balancing your personal home life with music. How are you able to do that? What's kind of worked for you?
Well, it kind of didn't work years ago. I'm divorced, and I think music contributed to that. Being away from home, being out late at night, not spending as much time as I should have with my wife and young children and so on. But as time goes by, I've kind of tried to be smarter with my schedule. Also, the kids grow up, so they're more independent. That makes things a lot easier. I'm not sure there's a real answer to that question or a magic wand. I'll bet that 9 out of 10 musicians you talk to have the same struggles, because music takes so much of your soul and so much of your energy and so much of your time away. It's an age-old story. It's really tough. It's really tough to run parallel tracks and make it successful. Something's got to give. For me, I stay local here in the region. Our shows are earlier. That's really a cool thing that the past few years, performance start times and end times are earlier than they used to be. And it's just been a fine, tightrope. Just try to get that balancing act.
And I think that leads me perfectly into my next question. What advice would you have for a musician just starting out in their music career?
Well, if they're just starting and they're young and they're single and there's no wife and there's no kids or no partner, I say the advice is write. Original music. Create your own voice, your own style, your own persona. And focus on that right out the gate. Excuse me. The sooner you get there, the sooner you're going to have a fulfilling and you're going to have a better opportunity to more or less connect with people. And I'm not saying you have to be a superstar or play in the arenas and all that, because there's a lot of wonderful musicians that play in coffee shops that I have so much respect for, and their music's incredible, and they have a fulfilling life and a fulfilling career in music. But it really does all revolve around originality and creating your own voice and your own style.
Now, can you share your social media links?
Sure. My website is johnvento.com, and that's VENTO, johnvento.com. I'm John Vento Music on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter.
Is there anything else you'd like to promote or share?
I did want to mention YouTube also. I have John Vento Music YouTube channel. No, just again to mention the album Love, Lust, and Other Wreckage, and then in the fall we have the stage play Love, Lust, and Other Wreckage, September 13th and 14th here in Pittsburgh at the beautifully renovated Oaks Theater in Oakmont, Pennsylvania.
All right, I'd like to give a very big thank you to my guests for joining me today here on the Creative Collective. As always, write your comments below. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video. And for all of your promotion, marketing, as well as music career consulting needs, be sure to email ennisproductions@gmail.com.